As a kid, I used to have dreams that I could fly. And in those dreams, that feeling I felt when I was flying was really like none other. It felt awesome. It felt like freedom. It's a feeling that I also feel when I'm on just the right bike and things just flow and fly. The first time I rode this Ritchey after putting it together, there was a few things that weren't quite perfect. There was a few things that I knew immediately I wanted to change. There was a few things I knew weren't working quite right and weren't fully adjusted. By the end of that first ride, they were. But I felt that feeling of freedom, that flowy feeling of flying. There's something about a steel bike, and on this one, I did tubeless tires, that just felt right. The fit was perfect. The suppleness of the frame was perfect. The geometry just felt right. Even with that short little stubby stem, everything just felt good. I was in love. Now, when I first built this bike up, I left it rusty. I did it kind of as a rat bike build, just quick and dirty. And after that first ride, I knew I was going to do something a little better with this. And trust me, even removing these decals was almost painful, but I knew I was giving this bike a new life. I knew that the rust that was on the frame needed to come off. I knew the only way really to do that was to clear the whole frame completely, get it right down to the bare metal. And when I did, I loved it even more. The fillet brazing on the seat tube, just everything was well made, done up nicely, and it was my chance now to give it a fresh new look. One that gave a nod to its past and maybe gave it at least another piece of flair. Since doing that last bike with my son, I really enjoyed doing the fades and had to do just a little bit of a fade on this one. For the decals, initially I reached out to Ritchey. They were really helpful, but not able to find the exact same decals that were used on the Ritchey Ascent. I was able to source these ones actually from velocals that I used for the tubing sticker on the Voodoo frame I did with my son last week. They turned out great. I did them on top of the color coat and before I did the clear coat. And then, like I've done on most of my bikes recently, I did 3 coats of clear. For me, this is kind of the minimum that you should do. It really gives it just enough coverage to really finish it off. The next part, I was able to find some new old stock Ritchey hubs that I wanted to build up into some new wheels. These are ones that are set up to run both from 8 to 10 speeds on the cassette, and it meant building up the wheels. I know a lot of you guys have asked for me to do a tutorial on the method that I use for building wheels. I do plan on doing that, and I'll collect footage and I'll have that put together sometime in the future, but not on this build. Now, like I did on the last build, when I put this together, I did a tubeless setup. These rims that I'm using here are rims that actually I had on other wheels, on some 7-speed wheels. They have Schrader valves on them, and I actually kind of wanted to try doing tubeless with Schrader valves. So these rims also aren't welded, so I was curious to see how that would work. Along the seam on the rims, and I don't show it in the video, I did put some CA glue along the seams to try to seal them in, and I think that worked well. I then used Gorilla tape again to cover the inside of the rim, cover the spoke holes. And these are the Presta, or the Schrader valves that I used on the bike. And I'm using Continental Cross Kings again on this. The Cross Kings, actually, I've put on a few bikes now, and I'm quite impressed with them. They're one of the least expensive tubeless tires that you can find on Amazon. And every time I've needed them, they've come and they've performed well. They're not a super aggressive grip. They're good for the cross-country bikes that I've been putting together lately, and I think they're a great tire. There'll be a link for them in the description below. On these rims also, I just did one layer of tape, and they actually sealed up really easily. They filled up fine. I didn't have to do any coercing to get the air to go in. They filled up right quick and have held air for the last 3 days. So it worked. Ghetto tubeless on rims from, I don't know, probably the early 90s. This is the cassette also that I had on the rim. On the first build, it's an 8-speed cassette with a range from 11 to 40 on the teeth. This is the same seat post that I had on. I wanted to clean it up. It was a little scratched here and there, but I wanted to polish it up best I could to match some of the other parts I was going to be putting on. This is the same process I did on cranks on the on the Ibis build, and that I did on the cranks that I did on the Hudson Bay bike. This is the next thing. I reached out to Paul's Components also about this build, and they were willing to provide me with a few parts, including the thummies, the brake levers, and some front brakes. So I wanted to thank them for this build also. The thummy also, I'm using the micro shift, an 8-speed micro shift thummy shifter, and I think it made a great combo. I also wanted to have a dropper post, and nothing like the traditional dropper posts from Breeze and Angel, the height right. I'll put a link to this also. I got this one off of eBay, where they have their own new old stock height right seat post springs. On the last build of this Ritchey, I used the Continental Race King tires. Both of them, these Cross Kings and the Race Kings, are 2.2s. The Cross Kings, though, have a little more aggressive tread, and it was a much closer fit. Now, as part of the build, this was probably my favorite part, putting these Paul component parts on it. They looked so good. I had painted with the fade handlebars also, and the polished Paul brake levers, the thummy, and the brakes just looked amazing against the blue and red. They work great too. I've taken them out on a couple rides now since I finished this up a couple days ago, and awesome brakes, perform really well, feel great. Highly recommend them. They do some quality work. In fact, it's not just components, it's a piece of art. By far the best cantilever brakes I've ever used. These cranks are the ones that I used on the Hudson Bay bike. I took off the triple chainring setup on it, and I have here an Origin 8 chainring that is a 34 tooth. I was also able to find some Ritchey Logic clipless pedals off of eBay. These are new old stock also. They're just like the pedals that I had on the rat bike build of this, but they're new instead of beat up and old. And they're red too. How could I pass up some more red Ritchey pedals? Also, from the rat bike build, I'm using that adapter that lengthens the derailleur hanger so that I can span that full range of 11 to 40 on the cassette. And it works great. I haven't had any issues from before the build and since this rebuild with it at all. It's worked perfectly and made it so those 8 speeds are very accessible and smooth. The last thing to top this build off was a white Salitalia Flight saddle. The saddle I put on it originally was an old Salitalia Flight saddle that was white also, and I just loved how it looked on the bike, and so I picked up a new one off of Amazon. There'll be a link for that in the description below also. So my takeaway from this build has been that these old bikes, a lot of them are just still incredible, and there's a lot of enjoyment that can be had riding them. This Ritchey is by far my favorite bike right now that I have in my lineup. It is the one, and has been for the last 2 months, the one that I want to ride the most. That's why I wanted to do this restoration. The ride I had on it today was awesome. I truly love it. I'm grateful to spray.bike for the paint they provided, for Paul Components for these awesome shiny bits that I was able to put on my bike, and they perform awesome. So, look for opportunities to give those old things new life. Don't pass up those old 80's mountain bikes, because there are some true gems out there. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next video. Ciao.